The morning sun slipped through the tall windows of a massive white mansion sitting on a quiet hill. Everything around it looked perfect. Clean lawns, trimmed hedges, and sparkling glass that reflected the golden light. Inside, the sound of footsteps and soft voices filled the hallways. Every person working there knew one rule: don't make a mistake. The mansion belonged to a man named Adrian Cole, a billionaire known for his cold nature and sharp words. People respected him, but nobody dared to get close. He built his empire from scratch, turning small risks into big wins. But behind his success was a man who didn't trust easily. Years of betrayal had hardened him. He believed emotions were weakness and that kindness only made people take advantage of you. Every morning he would walk through the main hall exactly at 8. His staff lined up quietly, waiting for him to pass. He didn't smile or greet anyone. He just looked straight ahead, his black suit pressed to perfection, his shoes shining like mirrors. Everyone held their breath until he disappeared into his office. Only then did they start moving again. Among them was a young maid named Lena, who had joined the mansion a few weeks earlier. She was quiet, polite, and always on time. Her uniform was always neat, her hair tied back, and her eyes carried a tired but kind look. She had come from a small town far away, where she lived with her mother and 2 younger siblings. Her father had died when she was a baby, and her mother worked long hours in other people's houses to raise the children. Lena wanted to change her family's life, so when she got the chance to work in the Cole mansion, she didn't think twice. The pay was good, even if the work was tough. She sent most of her earnings home and kept only enough for a simple meal each day. That morning felt like any other day. Lena woke up early, prepared the guest rooms, and dusted the main hall. She moved quietly, careful not to make a sound. The mansion was silent except for the ticking of a large golden clock in the corner. She was polishing a glass table when she heard a sudden crash behind her. The sound was sharp, like something expensive had shattered. She turned quickly and froze. On the floor lay pieces of a broken vase, glittering in the sunlight. It was one of the most valuable pieces in the mansion, a rare antique Adrian had bought from Italy. Her heart started pounding. She didn't even touch it. She had just walked past that area moments ago. She bent down, trying to pick up the pieces carefully before anyone saw, but it was too late. The head butler, Mr. Harris, had already entered the hall. His eyes widened when he saw the mess. "What happened here?" he demanded. I don't know, sir," Lena stammered, her voice shaking. "I just turned around and saw it on the floor. I swear I didn't touch it." But Mr. Harris had worked for Adrian long enough to know what would happen next. He sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "You should have been more careful. You know what this means?" Before Lena could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed down the marble corridor. Everyone turned as Adrian Cole walked in. His eyes moved from the broken vase to the frightened maid. The room fell silent. "Who did this?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. Mr. Harris hesitated. "Sir, it appears the new maid was in the hall when it happened." Adrian's sharp gaze landed on Lena. "You broke it?" Her throat went dry. "No, sir. I didn't. I was just—" "Don't lie to me," he cut her off. "This vase was worth more than your entire salary for 10 years. Do you think I'll believe it just fell on its own?" "I promise I didn't do it," she whispered. "I would never—" enough." His voice grew harder. "I don't tolerate carelessness or lies in my house. You're finished here." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. "Please, sir, I'm telling the truth." But Adrian turned to the security guard nearby. "Take her out. I don't want to see her face again." The guard stepped forward, hesitant but obedient. Lena tried to explain again, her words trembling. "Please, just check the cameras." "You'll see," Adrian ignored her. "Drag her out if she won't move." The guard gently took her arm, trying not to hurt her, but Lena was shaking. Panic rose inside her as she realized her whole life could change because of something she didn't do. As the guard started to lead her away, she broke down and screamed one word that stopped everyone cold. "Father." The hall fell silent. Even the guard froze mid-step. Adrian turned sharply, his face tightening. For a second, he thought he misheard. The sound of that word echoed in his head like a bell. Lena was crying uncontrollably, trying to pull her arm free. Please, I didn't do it." "My father, he worked here years ago. He always said this place destroyed his life. He was loyal to you." Adrian blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "My father worked for you," she cried. "His name was Peter. My mother told me he worked in this mansion before I was born. Then he lost everything because of a lie. She said he was blamed for something he didn't do. The name hit Adrian like a stone. Peter, a name buried deep in his memory, a man who once worked for him decades ago. He had been a loyal driver, someone Adrian trusted until one day he vanished after being accused of stealing company money. Adrian had believed the rumors and never looked back. Now this young maid, this girl, was saying she was his daughter. For a long moment, no one spoke. Adrian looked at Lena's face, her eyes full of tears, her voice trembling with desperation. Something about her expression, something in the shape of her eyes, felt strangely familiar. "Get out," he finally said, his voice low and unsteady. "Leave her." The guard let go of Lena's arm. Adrian turned and walked away quickly, disappearing into his office. His heart was beating faster than it had in years. He didn't know what to feel, anger, confusion, or guilt. That one word had cracked open a part of his past he had long buried. Lena stood there, shaking, unsure what just happened. Mr. Harris approached her softly. "You'd better go to your room for now," he whispered. "Don't say anything more. The boss needs time." Lena nodded weakly. She went to the small room where the maid stayed, sat on her bed and cried quietly. She thought about her mother's stories, how her father once worked for a rich man who turned against him, how he left home one morning and never came back. All her life she had wondered who that man was. Now she knew. Meanwhile, in his office, Adrian sat behind his desk staring at the wall. Peter's face kept appearing in his mind. The man who had once stood beside him through his early struggles. The man who never complained even when treated unfairly. He remembered the day Peter was accused. Money had gone missing from the accounts and all the signs pointed to him. Adrian had been furious. He didn't give Peter a chance to defend himself. He just fired him and sent him away, believing he had been betrayed. Weeks later, he heard Peter had disappeared, leaving behind a pregnant wife. Adrian never thought about it again until today. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Could this girl really be Peter's daughter? Could he have destroyed a good man's life by mistake? The sound of her scream still echoed in his ears. Father. It wasn't just a word. It was a wound reopened. For the first time in many years, Adrian didn't feel like the powerful man everyone feared. He felt small, guilty, and uncertain. He realized he had judged the girl the same way he once judged her father, without proof, without listening. Outside, the staff whispered among themselves. No one dared to speak loudly, but everyone had heard that one word. They didn't know what it meant, but they knew something in the mansion had changed forever. That night, the house was unusually quiet. Lena sat by the small window in her room, staring at the city lights below the hill. She thought about leaving, but something inside her told her to stay, at least until she got the truth. Adrian, in his office, opened an old drawer and pulled out a faded photograph. It was him and Peter standing beside a black car, both smiling. He stared at it for a long time. The memories were clear now. The loyalty, the friendship, the trust, and then the accusation. He felt a weight in his chest that words couldn't describe. He looked out the window and saw the same stars that Lena was staring at from her small room. Two people separated by power and pain, both trapped by a mistake made years ago. Neither of them knew that the next morning would change their lives forever. The next morning came quietly. The mansion that usually felt full of power and routine now carried a strange stillness. The staff whispered softly as they worked, afraid of being heard. Everyone knew something had happened the day before, something that shook the boss more than anyone had ever seen. Adrian Cole had not left his room that morning. His breakfast sat untouched on the table. He had spent the entire night in his office thinking about that single word that had come out of the maid's mouth. Father. He looked tired. The confident man everyone feared now looked lost, as if the world he built no longer made sense. Around mid-morning, he finally called his assistant, Mr. Lewis, into the room. "I want you to find out everything you can about that maid," he said quietly. "Her full name, where she came from, her family. Everything." Mr. Lewis hesitated. "The new maid?" "Lena, sir?" Adrian nodded. "Yes. Don't tell anyone what you're doing. And don't let her know." When Lewis left, Adrian leaned back in his chair. He opened an old drawer again and looked at the photograph of his former driver. Peter. He remembered the man's calm smile, his loyalty, and the way he always said, One day you'll be great, sir. But don't lose your kindness. Adrian had lost it. He could see that now. Hours later, Mr. Lewis returned with a file in his hand. He placed it on the desk. This is everything we could find, sir. Adrian opened the folder slowly. There were documents, a few photographs, and a copy of Lena's birth certificate. His eyes stopped at one name, Father Peter Hale. His hands froze. The air felt heavy. It was true. Her mother's name? Adrian asked. Clara Hale. Lewis replied softly. She lives in the countryside. Her husband Peter passed away about 20 years ago. The records show he was once employed by your company, sir. His file was marked as terminated for theft. Adrian's throat tightened. Theft. He whispered the word like it hurt to say it. Sir, Lewis continued carefully, I did a little more digging. The man who reported the missing money was your old business partner, Mr. Raymond. I checked the dates. A month after Peter was fired, Raymond opened a secret account in another name. The numbers match. I think Peter might have been innocent. Adrian looked up slowly, his eyes filled with regret. He had trusted Raymond completely back then. The man had left the company years ago, but the damage he caused had lasted a lifetime. Thank you, Lewis, he said quietly. Leave the file. Don't mention this to anyone. When the door closed, Adrian sat alone, holding the paper in his hands. The truth hit him harder than he expected. Because of his quick judgment, he had destroyed a man's life. He had believed a lie without asking a single question. And now, after all these years, that man's daughter was working as a maid under his roof. That evening, Lena kept to herself. She worked quietly in the kitchen, avoiding everyone's eyes. She didn't know what would happen next. She was sure she would be fired soon. Her friend among the maids tried to comfort her. Maybe he'll forget about it, she whispered. Lena shook her head. People like him don't forget. But I didn't lie. My father worked for him. I'm sure of it. Before anyone could say more, the head butler appeared at the door. Lena, he said, the boss wants to see you. In his office now. Her heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands nervously and followed the butler through the long hallway. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. When they reached the office door, the butler stepped aside. Go in. She hesitated for a second before knocking softly. Come in, Adrian's voice said. Lena entered slowly, keeping her head down. Adrian was standing by the window, looking outside at the fading sunlight. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he turned toward her. Sit down, he said gently. She sat at the edge of the chair, her hands shaking slightly. Adrian studied her face quietly. He could now see the resemblance to Peter. The same brown eyes, the same calm expression when she tried to stay strong. He took a deep breath. You said yesterday your father worked for me, he began. Tell me about him. Lena looked up surprised. My father, I never really knew him. He died when I was very young. My mother used to tell me he was a good man, kind, loyal. He worked for a rich man in the city, but something happened and he lost everything. She said he was blamed for stealing. He tried to prove his innocence, but no one listened. Adrian's jaw tightened. And you think that man was me? My mother never said your name, she replied softly. But when I came here and saw the mansion, it looked like the one in her old photo. And when I heard your name, it sounded familiar. I didn't mean to shout like that yesterday. I was scared and the memory just came out. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his voice lower now. Your father's name was Peter Hale? Yes, she whispered. He nodded slowly. I remember him. Her eyes widened. You knew him? He worked for me a long time ago, Adrian said. And I made a terrible mistake. I believed he stole from me when he didn't. I didn't give him a chance to explain. Lena stared at him, speechless. I didn't know he had a family, Adrian continued, his voice filled with regret. I didn't know he had a daughter. If I had known... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Lena looked down, her heart heavy. My mother never blamed you, she said softly. She said life is unfair sometimes, but she never hated you. She only wished my father's name could be cleared one day. Adrian felt a lump rise in his throat. She deserved better. You all did. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt full of unspoken pain. Finally, Adrian said quietly, I owe you and your family the truth. I'll find proof that your father was innocent. I should have done that years ago. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir. That's all we ever wanted. When she left the office, Adrian stayed by the window long after dark, staring at the city lights below. The man who once believed power was everything now felt the weight of his own mistakes. He realized that money could never fix what arrogance had destroyed. Later that night, Lena sat by her small window again. She thought about what had happened. She didn't know if she could trust the billionaire's sudden change of heart, but she saw something different in his eyes, a kind of sadness that didn't look fake. She touched the little pendant around her neck, the only thing she had from her father. She whispered softly, "Maybe he'll finally know the truth, Papa." Down the hall, Adrian couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Peter's face. He remembered the day he fired him, the anger, the harsh words, the silence that followed. Now that he knew the truth, it hurt even more. He opened a folder on his desk, searching for old records, letters, anything that could prove Peter's innocence. He found a few old invoices and payment logs. Some numbers didn't match, just as Lewis had said. He decided that in the morning he would call his lawyers and clear Peter's name officially. He would also find Clara, Peter's widow, and apologize in person. It wouldn't bring Peter back, but maybe it could give his family peace. For the first time in many years, Adrian felt something he hadn't felt before. Shame mixed with hope. He realized that the young maid he had almost thrown out wasn't just a worker in his house. She was a living reminder of the man who once believed in him. The next morning, Lena woke up early. The sky was still gray with dawn. She went downstairs to prepare breakfast for the staff, her thoughts still spinning. She didn't know that Adrian had already left the house before sunrise, heading toward the city to meet an old contact from his early business days. He wanted answers about Raymond, his former partner. If Raymond was the one who framed Peter, he would make sure the world knew the truth. Back at the mansion, Lena tried to focus on her work, but her heart was restless. Every sound made her turn, wondering if someone would call her name again. Around noon, the butler returned with news. "The boss is out on business," he said to the staff. "No one is to disturb his office." Lena looked toward the closed office door and whispered to herself, "I hope he finds what he's looking for." That evening, when Adrian returned, he looked exhausted but relieved. He had found proof, documents, letters, and old statements that showed Peter was innocent all along. He also found that Raymond had left the country years ago, but the truth was now clear. He went straight to his office, holding the papers tightly in his hands. He knew what he had to do next. He would call a meeting not just to clear Peter's name, but to make things right for the daughter who had unknowingly reminded him of everything he once forgot: honor, loyalty, and the cost of pride. As the night settled over the mansion again, Lena lit a small candle by her window and prayed quietly for her father's peace. She didn't know that the man who had once ruined her father's life was now preparing to give it back, and deep inside, both of them were standing at the edge of something neither expected: a chance to rewrite the past. The next morning, the sky above the city was pale and quiet. Adrian Cole stood near the window of his office, holding the folder that contained the truth he had been searching for. The papers inside were old but clear, proof that Peter Hale had never stolen a single coin. Every number, every letter pointed toward one man: Raymond, his former business partner. Adrian's hands trembled slightly as he closed the folder. For years he had built his empire with pride, believing his success made him right. But now he realized how wrong he had been. He had destroyed an innocent man's life because he was too proud to listen. He looked at his reflection in the glass. The man staring back at him was not the same one who ruled with fear. He looked older, softer, and burdened with regret. He turned away and called Mr. Lewis. "Prepare the conference room," he said, "and ask Lena to come see me. There's something she needs to know." Downstairs, Lena was arranging flowers in the hallway when the butler approached her. "The boss wants to see you," he said quietly. Her heart skipped. Every time she was called to his office, she didn't know what to expect. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron and followed him upstairs. When she entered the room, Adrian was standing by his desk, holding a thin folder. The sunlight made the lines on his face clearer, but his eyes looked gentler than before. "Sit down, Lena," he said softly. She obeyed, sitting carefully on the edge of the chair. Adrian took a deep breath. "I spent the last 2 days finding out the truth about your father," he began. "You were right. He worked for me, and he was innocent." Lena looked up sharply. "You mean..." He nodded. Someone else stole the money. Your father was blamed for it. I believed a lie, and because of that I ruined his life. I can't change the past, but I can tell you now I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what to say. She had dreamed of hearing those words all her life, but now that they were real, they felt heavy. My father always said the man he worked for was powerful, she said softly. But he never hated you. Even when things got hard, he said you weren't a bad person. Just someone who didn't listen. Adrian's chest tightened. He was right, he admitted quietly. I didn't listen to the people who cared. I only listened to my pride. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The sound of the city outside seemed far away. Then Adrian pushed the folder toward her. This is everything I found, he said. Records, letters, even signed papers from the man who really did it. I'll make sure your father's name is cleared publicly. His honor will be restored. Lena stared at the folder, unable to stop the tears that rolled down her cheeks. She reached out, touching it gently as if it was something sacred. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means to my family. Adrian shook his head. No, it's me who doesn't deserve your forgiveness. She looked up. You don't need to ask for it, she said quietly. You've done more than anyone else ever tried to do. That evening, Adrian held a meeting in the large conference hall of his mansion. The staff gathered, confused and curious. They rarely saw their boss call everyone together like this. When Lena entered the room, she stood quietly in the back, unsure what was happening. Adrian stood before them, calm but serious. I owe everyone here the truth, he began. Years ago, a man named Peter Hale worked for me. I believed he had stolen from me, and I fired him. That was a lie. He was innocent. The real thief was another man who betrayed both of us. The staff looked at each other in surprise. Adrian continued, Because of my mistake, Peter lost everything. His family suffered for years. I can never undo that, but I want to make things right. His daughter Lena has been working here without knowing the full truth. From this day on, her father's name is cleared. There was silence in the room. Some of the older staff remembered Peter and looked down, ashamed they hadn't spoken up. Others looked at Lena with new respect. Adrian turned toward her. You don't work for me anymore, he said gently. Lena's heart sank. I understand, sir, she whispered, thinking she was being dismissed again. But Adrian smiled faintly. You misunderstand me. You won't work for me, you'll work with me if you wish. I want to help you continue your studies, finish your education, and build the life your father would have wanted for you. Lena stood frozen, not sure what to say. She had never expected something like this. I can't take that, she finally said. You've already done enough. Adrian shook his head. It's not charity. It's what's right. You and your family deserve peace. Her eyes filled again, but this time with a different kind of emotion. Relief mixed with gratitude. Thank you, sir, she said softly. But my only wish was for my father's name to be cleared. That's enough for me. Adrian looked at her with respect. You remind me of him, he said. Strong, humble, and honest. After the meeting, most of the staff went back to work, still whispering about what they had heard. Lena walked out into the garden, needing air. The evening light painted everything in gold. For the first time since she arrived, the mansion didn't feel like a cage. It felt peaceful. Adrian joined her a few minutes later, walking slowly. He used to love this garden, he said quietly. Your father. He always said the flowers here grew better because they were cared for by people who believed in small things. Lena smiled faintly. My mother said the same thing about him. He believed good people were like flowers. They grow even in hard soil. Adrian looked at her and said softly, He raised a good daughter. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the soft wind. That night, Adrian sat in his study looking at the old photograph again. For the first time in years, he didn't feel anger when he thought about the past. He felt peace. He picked up the phone and called Mr. Lewis. Prepare a press release, he said. We'll make the truth public tomorrow. I want Peter Hale's name cleared officially with every record corrected. When he hung up, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He thought about how one small moment, one word shouted, in fear, had forced him to face everything he'd ignored for decades. He realized that success meant nothing if it came at the cost of hurting others. The next morning, news spread across the city. Business journals, newspapers, and online outlets all reported the same story. Billionaire admits past mistake, clears name of former employee after decades. People were shocked. Some praised Adrian for his honesty. Others criticized him for waiting so long. But he didn't care. For him, it wasn't about reputation anymore. It was about truth. Lena received calls from reporters who wanted to hear her side, but she refused to talk. She didn't want attention. All she wanted was to tell her mother that their pain had finally ended. That evening, she called home. Her mother's voice cracked when she heard the news. "He did it?" she asked through tears. "Yes, Mama," Lena said softly. "Everyone knows now. Papa's name is clear." There was a long silence, then her mother whispered, "He can rest now." Days passed and the mansion slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But something had changed, not just in the house but in the man who owned it. Adrian began talking more kindly to his staff. He took time to ask about their families, their worries, their dreams. For the first time, people didn't fear him. They respected him. Sometimes, when he walked past the garden, he would see Lena sitting by the fountain with a small notebook in her hand, writing something quietly. One afternoon, he asked her, "What are you writing?" She smiled. "A letter to my father," she said. "Just words I never got to say." He nodded slowly. "If you ever want help publishing your story, let me know." "People need to hear it," she laughed softly. "Maybe one day. But for now, it's just for me." That night, as the mansion lights dimmed, Adrian looked out at the sky once more. The stars shimmered gently, the same ones he had looked at in guilt just days earlier. But now they didn't remind him of loss. They reminded him of forgiveness. He thought of Lena's father, the man who had once stood beside him as a friend, not as a servant. And he whispered softly, "I hope you can forgive me, old friend. I'll take care of her, I promise." And somewhere, deep inside, he felt that maybe, just maybe, the man he had wronged had already forgiven him. Adrian sat quietly in his office that morning, staring out the wide glass window that showed the city below. His empire stretched far beyond what he had ever dreamed of, yet for the first time in his life he felt small. The night had been long. He hadn't slept at all. Thoughts of Lena's words, her pain, and the truth about her father's innocence kept circling in his head like a storm he couldn't escape. He knew what he had to do, but part of him hesitated, not because he was afraid of losing his reputation, but because facing the truth meant admitting he had destroyed someone's life. It meant showing the world that the man everyone respected had once been cruel and blind. Still, he couldn't carry that guilt anymore. He had to make things right. He called his assistant Daniel and asked him to gather all the employees in the mansion that afternoon. "And call the company's board members too," he said in a low, serious voice. "There's something I need to say, something that should have been said long ago." Daniel hesitated. "Sir, may I ask what this is about?" Adrian looked at him with tired eyes. "It's about a mistake I made years ago, a man I wronged, and a girl who reminded me that truth doesn't die, no matter how hard you try to bury it." By noon, word had spread through the mansion that something unusual was happening. The staff whispered among themselves, wondering why the boss wanted everyone present. Even Lena heard about it, though she had planned to leave quietly that same day. Her small bag was already packed. When Daniel found her and said, "Mr. Cole wants you there," she hesitated. She didn't want another confrontation. She didn't want sympathy either. But something inside her told her to go. Maybe because a small part of her still believed in goodness. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, everyone gathered in the grand hall, the same place where Lena had once been accused and humiliated. The air was thick with curiosity and tension. Adrian stood at the front, hands clasped, his expression unreadable. He waited until the murmurs stopped. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Years ago," he said slowly, "I trusted the wrong person and punished the wrong man." Every word echoed in the silent hall. The staff looked at each other, unsure what he was referring to. Adrian continued, his voice shaking slightly. "There was a man named Peter who worked for me as a driver. He was honest, loyal, and always did more than he was asked. One day I believed he stole from me. I never gave him a chance to explain. I let my anger and pride decide his fate. I destroyed his name, and because of that, his family suffered." Lena stood frozen at the back of the hall, her eyes filling with tears. Adrian's voice softened. "A few days ago, I accused someone again, Someone who reminded me of that man. Her name is Lena, and just like her father, she faced my anger for something she didn't do. Now everyone turned toward her. The realization spread across the faces of the staff like a slow wave. Adrian looked directly at Lena. Her father was Peter, the same man I wronged, the same man I failed to protect. The room fell silent again. Adrian's voice cracked as he went on. Peter didn't steal from me. The real thief was someone else, my own business partner, Robert Hale. He took the money and framed Peter to cover his tracks. I found proof of it only this week. Letters, bank records, and a confession from one of his old assistants. People gasped quietly. Daniel, who had been standing nearby, lowered his head. He knew what it meant for a man like Adrian to admit something like this in public. Adrian took a long pause, his eyes glassy with regret. Peter lost everything because of my arrogance. His family lost their peace. I can't bring him back, but I can clear his name. From this day forward, Peter's record will be restored. His name will be honored, as it should have been. And Lena, he turned toward her again. You will never work as a maid again. Not here, not anywhere. I will make sure your father's story is told with truth and respect. Lena's heart raced. She had dreamed of hearing her father's name cleared for so long, but she never expected it to happen like this, in front of everyone. Her hands trembled as she wiped her tears, unsure what to say. Adrian continued, I've also decided to return your family's old house, the one that was taken when I fired your father. It's yours again. And if you ever wish to study, to build a future, I'll make sure you have every opportunity. The crowd murmured. Many of the workers had tears in their eyes. They had seen Adrian as a cold, unreachable man, but now they were witnessing something few thought possible, a man humbled by his own conscience. Lena stepped forward slowly. Her voice was soft but firm. I don't want money, sir. I don't want gifts. I only wanted my father's name to be free. Adrian nodded. And now it is, because of you. For a long moment, they stood facing each other in silence. A man who had once destroyed her family's life, and a daughter who had carried that pain for years, but something in their eyes had changed. The anger was gone. In its place was understanding. Later that evening, after everyone had left, Adrian sat alone in the same hall. The light from the chandelier fell softly across his face. He thought about Peter, about the day he had fired him, the harsh words he had spoken the years that followed. If only he had listened back then, maybe none of this would have happened. He didn't hear Lena's footsteps until she spoke gently. You look tired. He looked up, surprised. You should be home by now. I will go, she said, stepping closer. But I needed to say something first. He nodded, waiting. My mother used to say that truth always finds its way back, she said quietly. I didn't believe her until today. Thank you for telling it. Adrian sighed. I should be the one thanking you. If you hadn't said that word, I would have never faced what I buried for years. Lena smiled faintly. Sometimes pain is the only way to wake someone up. They both stood there for a while, not saying much. The silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful, the kind of silence that comes after a storm has passed. Before leaving, Lena turned back and said, You were right about one thing. My father was loyal. He used to tell my mother that his boss was the smartest man he ever met. He admired you until the end. Adrian swallowed hard. I didn't deserve that. Maybe not then, she said softly. But today, you did. When she left, Adrian walked to his study. He opened an old drawer and took out a dusty photo, one of him and Peter standing beside an old car, smiling. It had been buried there for decades. He placed it on his desk beside his family pictures. The next morning, Adrian held a small press conference. He publicly announced the truth about Peter and cleared his name in front of the media. It wasn't for attention. It was for peace. He even arranged a small scholarship in Peter's name to help the children of workers who couldn't afford school. The story spread quickly, and many people were touched by his honesty. Some praised him, others questioned his motives. But Adrian didn't care. What mattered was that Peter's story was no longer buried under lies. Days later, Lena visited her father's grave. She knelt down and placed a small white flower on the stone. "It's over now," she whispered. "He told the world the truth. You can rest." The wind blew gently through the trees, as if carrying her words away. When she returned to the mansion, Adrian was in the garden. He didn't look like the same man anymore. The stiffness in his face had softened, replaced by something calm and almost kind. He looked up and smiled faintly. "You came back." "I had to say goodbye properly," she said. "You don't have to leave," he replied. "The mansion feels empty without someone reminding me to be human." Lena chuckled softly. "You'll be fine. You've changed." "Maybe," Adrian said quietly. "But you showed me how." Before leaving, she turned to him one last time. "My father would have forgiven you. I think he already has." And with that, she walked out into the sunlight, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Adrian watched her go, feeling a strange mix of sadness and peace. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a billionaire or a man of power. He just felt human, and that was enough. The mansion felt quieter in the days that followed. For years, it had been a place filled with tension and fear, but now it was calm. The staff no longer whispered nervously when Adrian entered a room. Instead, they greeted him with respect, not because he was their boss, but because they had seen a side of him they never thought existed. Adrian had changed in ways even he couldn't explain. He started walking through the gardens every morning, something he hadn't done in years. Sometimes he stopped to talk to the workers, asking about their families or thanking them for their efforts. The cold man who once barked orders now listened with quiet patience. But deep inside, there was still a small emptiness, a silence that lingered when he was alone. It wasn't the kind that came from regret anymore. It was something gentler, like missing a part of life he never had. A daughter's laughter, a family's warmth, the kind of bond money could never buy. Lena, meanwhile, had started a new chapter of her life. After Adrian cleared her father's name and returned her family's home, she went back to the small town she grew up in. It took her a few weeks to decide what she wanted next, but eventually, she wrote to Adrian, thanking him again and telling him her plans. She wanted to study business management not because of wealth, but because she wanted to start a small foundation to help people like her father, honest workers who were treated unfairly. When Adrian received her letter, he read it several times. It wasn't long, just a few short paragraphs written in simple words, but it touched something deep inside him. He called Daniel into his office. "Find out which university she applied to," he said. Daniel smiled. "Already did, sir. She got accepted. Starts next month." Adrian nodded slowly. "Good. Make sure her tuition and living costs are handled quietly. She doesn't need to know it came from me." Daniel hesitated. "She might find out eventually." Adrian smiled faintly. "That's all right. She'll probably be angry when she does. But I don't mind." Months passed. Adrian focused less on business and more on things that actually mattered. He reduced his workload, started visiting charity centers, and even attended the scholarship program he had launched in Peter's name. Each time he handed out a scholarship letter to a young student, he thought of Lena's father, the man whose loyalty had been buried under his mistakes for so many years. One evening, as Adrian was sitting on the balcony, looking at the fading sunset, Daniel walked in holding a small envelope. "This just arrived, sir. From Lena." Adrian's eyes brightened. "Let me see." Inside was a short note written in her neat handwriting. "I passed my first semester with good grades. I joined a group that helps young workers learn about their rights. I also started teaching small children on weekends. I hope you're doing well. I'll visit soon." Adrian smiled as he read it. He had received thousands of letters in his life, from investors, business partners, even politicians, but none of them meant as much as this one. He placed it carefully in a drawer beside Peter's old photo. Weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Lena arrived at the mansion. She had grown in confidence. Her posture was straighter, her eyes brighter, and her voice calmer. The staff welcomed her warmly. Everyone remembered the young maid who had changed their boss's heart. When Adrian saw her, he couldn't help but smile. "You look different," he said. She laughed. "I feel different. Life outside these walls is quieter, but happier." They walked together through the garden. The air smelled of fresh rain, and the flowers were in full bloom. "I read your letter," Adrian said. "You've been busy." "I've been trying to make use of what I've learned here," she replied. "You taught me more than you think." He chuckled softly. "I don't remember teaching you anything worth learning." "You did," she said. "You taught me how easily people can change when they finally listen to their heart." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes from shared understanding. After a moment, Adrian said, "There's something I want to show you." He led her inside to his study. On his desk were several framed photographs, some of his family, and right in the center, the old picture of Peter standing beside him. "I found this in an old box," Adrian said. "I thought you might like to have it." Lena held the photo carefully. Her father looked so young and happy. "He really admired you, you know," she said softly. "I didn't deserve that admiration," Adrian replied. "You do now," she said. He would have said the same. For a long time, they both stood quietly, looking at the photo.